We don't deal with that sex pet shit. You don't come to Crow to find a partner. You don't come to Crow to flirt with each other. You don't come to Crow to be a harassment in the community, because bus tickets are cheap and the Secretary of Defense likes to travel.
That's Kiksuya, a member of CROW, which stands for Coalition of Revolutionaries and Organized Workers.
My name is Kiksuya. I go by Kiksuya. I'm Oglala Lakota in the Eastern Band Cherokee. I'm urban diaspora. I grew up in the Deep South, lived in Arkansas, in Osage lands, and on Houma Choctaw lands down in Southeast Louisiana. My political journey, I just started as kind of a confused anarchist and eventually made my way to Marxist, Leninism, Maoism.
I sat down with them to talk about organizing in a settler colonial context.
I'm currently the Secretary of Defense. I focus mainly on firearms training, firearms education, safe handling, safe storage. If we do large events, I make sure that I'm in charge of their security plans. And locally in occupied Osage lands, Crow has a unique relationship with immigrant defense organizations and poultry worker organizations. And our defense kind of melds in with that. And we can talk more about that later. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
In my last video on mutual aid and combativity, we talked about organizing the masses for combat. To build up combativity, you need to build up trust, and mutual aid is far from the only method of achieving this goal. Another tactic Crow uses is engaging in already existing struggles of the masses.
So we don't just walk up to, smoking workers outside of the Tyson plant and say, hey, do you want to learn about communism? We find organizations, like I said, that could be non-communist organizations, but that are connected with the workers. We approach those organizations with our ideas and plans for what first we do social investigation. We figure out how can we help this community specifically. So then we approach an organization. For example, the organization locally that we work with a lot is called Equipo. And Equipo is an immigrant defense organization. So because they already had a kind of anti-imperialist, anti-establishment lens, we went directly to them. We said, hey, we have these materials, we have these things that we can do for you. How can we use those to help your organization? So then once we establish a connection with those organizations, then we can start saying, okay, let's talk about, at the last meeting you brought up your uncle who works here and he's having problems with this, X, Y, and Z. So let's talk to your uncle if you want to. And because we've already established a connection with this, they'll be like, okay, yeah. And, we go and we meet these people and we talk to them directly.
Such a big part of organizing is building up relationships and establishing credibility. What matters is to find an in to even be able to struggle alongside of them. This is the whole point of what Maoists call the three withs: live with the masses, work with the masses, struggle with the masses.
For example, when we worked with an organization called Venceremos, they're a poultry workers justice organization, and we work with them often as well. And the way that we connected with the workers with them is we went to a candlelight vigil that they were holding as an organization for COVID, for the victims of the COVID pandemic inside of poultry processing places, and doing those sort of things, not going somewhere and being like, okay, we're going to learn about Marx today. Just going there and showing that, hey, we Crow as an organization are here to support your organization and support the people that your organization is connected with. These ways that we approach these people are how we establish lasting community connections, especially with workers, and especially with the marginalized communities that we want to help guide and protect, from imperialism and from colonial backlash.
Of course, building coalitions with other organizations needs to fundamentally be based on line struggle and points of unity. It should also be part of a larger strategy. Why are you working with this organization? How does it help further your ultimate plan for revolution? How do you stay principled when a counter-revolutionary line is pushed? When should you push, and when should you tactically go along? These are all hard questions with no predefined answers. But if you're asking these questions, you're already more strategically oriented than a lot of organizations on the left. How you bridge the gap between leftist organizations and the masses depends on your local conditions. But the fact of the matter is, in the imperialist core, this gap exists. One of the reasons why is that communism is often treated as a subculture that only focuses on pandering to other communists. When there is a focus on actually doing mass work, many fall in the traps of either commandism and tailism, or worse, swing back and forth between them. Tailism means you're tailing behind the masses, not differentiating between backwards and advanced ideas, and not filtering their ideas through a strategic framework with revolution as a goal. Commandism means you're not listening to the masses and imposing your own ideas on them, which of course doesn't get you anywhere. This is why having a humble attitude and learning from the masses is so important.
In our area, there's several different communities of colonized and displaced peoples. We have Marshallese, we have Guatemalans, El Salvadorians, Mexicans, Somalian immigrants, and most of these people work in meat processing facilities or the likes of them. And because of that, we also have to think about, we're trying to be a part of different people's cultures, multiple different people's cultures. Some cultures that we might not necessarily understand. The Marshallese community especially, it's hard to become a part of their community without already being in the community. And you can't just go there and throw your ideas because the United States blew up their home. They're going to have huge distrust of just anybody here who comes into their community and believes that we know how to help. We know what your problems are. Because that's the incorrect way to approach things. And Crow doesn't do that.
This is why social investigation is so important. The masses know what their problems are, and often what the solutions are as well. It's about putting that in a revolutionary framework, as well as helping facilitate organization. And lastly, to make sure the most advanced ideas are leading the way. None of this can be done without social investigation. I'd recommend reading Activist Study Guide and CPP's On Mass Work on this topic. Links in description. Taking up a humble attitude when doing mass work is important, and the same goes for relating to comrades internally in the organization. Maintaining principled unity and upholding a culture that makes successful crit-self-crit possible is something any organization should strive to do. Things would be much easier if the working class was already unified, but it's not, and the divisions that have been created by the bourgeoisie are gonna show up in our organizing realities. And just continually shouting out that the goal is unity doesn't solve the problem. In the US, we're dealing with disunity in a settler colonial context. This raises the question, how do you create principled unity between white settlers and colonized peoples they helped oppress and/or aided in their genocide? Crow's answer to the problem is to only allow colonized people in the organization.
The possession of indigenous lands, the displacement of indigenous people, the destruction of the cultures, the genocide of peoples and animals and ecosystems. All of this has to be thought about when we organize today, right? All of this has to be understood for reality. And we have to understand that settler colonialism exists now. We are living in a settler colonial society, right? It is settler colonialism that continues to divide the colonized proletariat and the settler proletariat from unification. The biggest fear of the settler is the loss of settler colonialism, right? And that's something that's ingrained in all settlers within the United States. And even our leftist comrades, they still have these tendencies to be afraid whenever someone like me, I'm intimidating, I'm aggressive. And I've been told this, it's because of some sort of, in their mind, it could be because of some sort of savagery, right? These ideas still exist subconsciously within people. These ideas are ingrained into settlers from the moment that they're born. And especially if they're not in a household where that is actively combated, And that's something that, one of our biggest reorganizations was deciding not to have settlers as members anymore, right? And it all came from criticism. It came from criticizing the actions of members who were settlers, right? and the reaction of the settlers to the criticism. We are a place for people to be away from the colonial gaze because we've seen what the colonial gaze expects of us internally. We've seen how when we include settlers in our organizing, there is a line that they expect us to follow. And if we don't follow that line, we're stepping out of the acceptable ideas. This also has to do with the individual because we do have settlers who are volunteers, people who have shown us through action that they can be at least around us in organizing spaces. They can show up and they put their hands in and they do the work and they listen. And people talk about, the experiences that settlers have, how they can't be too much different. Poor settlers just the same as us. But I live in Arkansas and I know what poor settlers in Harrison, Arkansas want to do to me. And it sure as hell ain't organized with me to overthrow the bourgeoisie. If I'm in Harrison, Arkansas for more than 30 minutes, and trust me, I've been there to the Walmart because I've done work out in that area. When I'm out there, if I'm out there for too long, it's like everybody has called their brother and cousin to come harass me. People start showing up to look at you and it's like that all over Arkansas. And I understand why people are like, oh, you can't just say that about all settlers. But when there are still settlers here who are profligating the exact same ideas that their genocidal ancestors did, and we don't see our white comrades primarily focusing on ending that shit, it creates an environment of distrust. And my goal and Crow's goal is to build relationships with, settlers that are liberatory, leftist settlers who look to be liberatory. We build relationship with them to get them to understand that our conditions must be changed before unity is possible. Unity is the goal, but at this current and present time, it is not possible.
We have to reorient ourselves to think about problems strategically. This means experimenting with tactics, assessing their results, and see how they bring us closer to revolution. Historically, white working class settlers in the US have aided in the oppression and genocide of colonized people. This is a historical fact and a problem we can assess. Since there's been no solution to this problem as of yet, there should be different forms of experimentation on how to deal with this problem, and then public summations about the results of this experimentation for the movement to learn from. Crow has experienced this problem firsthand and has dealt with it by excluding settlers from its organization. This, within the US, is a contentious choice. But if you disagree, there's no point in banging your head against your computer. The point is to show alternative modes of organizing and proven through summations why your practice works better. Ultimately, practice will show us what is correct and what is incorrect. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't even want to come to terms with the fact that this problem exists. So thank you so much Kiksuya and Crow for sharing your organizing experiences with us. If you want to support Crow, there's links in the description of their Facebook, Twitter, and links to where you can donate funds.
And we also have a seed program going on right now. So if you need seeds and you want to grow some food, we'll send them to you. You'll get a cool envelope with a unique Crow stamp, which really makes me feel great. I love the Crow stamp. So if you want that, you can contact us there. We only accept donations through PayPal. That's the one thing.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, you'll enjoy this one about education during the Cultural Revolution. Big shout out to my patrons who support this channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe, y'all. Peace, Space Baby out.